Ladies, gentlemen, and my often forgotten, but certainly not by me, Armadillo Helmets, welcome to the channel and welcome to another guide. In this guide, we're going to be looking at the classic combo for Elite Dungeons, range at ED2. At one point or another, someone has used a pair of Ascensions at this dungeon way back when, maybe when it came out, up until present day RuneScape, where I still see people all the time using range here, and today I'm going to show you guys how I do it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. Alrighty, so starting out, this is the preset and relics that I am using for ED2. Now yes, this guide does include Bow of the Last Guardian, as I do own one. However, if you would like to see a budget version of this guide, I do have a couple ideas for that, and leave a comment down below if you would like to see that. However, now I'm just going to go over the general parts of this preset and whatnot before I get into some of these specific items. So as far as food is concerned, I like to use blue blubbers here, and sometimes I use Guthix Rest, but I ended up going for super brews as I only had room for 2 brews and 4 blubbers, and sometimes if I'm ECBing a bit too much in too many places, my health will go down rather quickly, so I like to bring the extra food just in case. The acceleration potion is very convenient for ED2, specifically between the 2 lava strike worms just after the spiders next to that little spider area, and the 4 black dragons on the other side. That long run acceleration potion is very nice for getting through there quickly, and from getting the set of 2 Hydrix dragons where you only have to kill 1 to the set of 2 Dragonstone dragons just before BSD. The rune pouches are there, they just have Disrupt Shield and Venge in them. There's nothing too special there, and it's following the standard rune pouch loadout, or grasping rune pouch loadout I should say, that the PvME has offered. Vuln bombs are pretty self-explanatory, they're really nice for getting extra damage off on bosses, and if you remember to toss them onto trash mobs you can get some extra speed there. However, I personally don't on most trash mobs. Maybe the Hydrix dragon I'll do it once in a while, or like a really obnoxious mob or something, but honestly I just use them for the bosses. The Dominion mines are there, and they work on pretty much everything in this dungeon, so you can pretty much drop them anywhere. Now, on other targets in the dungeon, like the black dragons and the lava strikes, they will not hit full 10Ks, but free damage is free damage, and they are lossless, so you can go ahead and place them down pretty much anywhere you want, and they're gonna work fine. The Lucky Charms are there, just for mostly getting extra Onyx Dust and some other nice little bits of cash. You know, you might as well bring them. And I go ahead and opt for Archer's Ring here because 99% of the time I'm using bow, and it happens to be better for bow camping compared to Reaver's Ring. Getting the extra crit damage is pretty nice, although I might go back to Reaver's at some point because with the Jazz Arrows, you are almost always at hit cap no matter what if you're in a Death Swiftness, and outside of Death Swiftness you're still hitting really hard, so I might just go back to Reavers for when I need to get Hydrix procs or something like that, but for now I'm just sticking with Archers. The Luck of the Dwarves is there just for the slim chance of getting an HSR. In Elite Dungeons, pretty much everything can proc the rare drop table in there, so I've seen people get double cheese and tomato bottas, and I am really fearful of that happening to me, considering how much I run through these dungeons. So until they update the relics for Luck of the Dwarves to be better integrated into them, you know, dropping the relic power or something like that, I will just use Luck of the Dwarves ring for the trash mobs, and then my Stalker's ring for the bosses. I go ahead and bring both Grim and Scripture of Wen. Scripture of Wen has a very nice proc for damage, and it is very nice on AoE targets as it is an AoE proc, so for a lot of things in the dungeon it will do nice damage to them, and then Grim is really nice for the bosses to take advantage of the hit cap that it can provide. So the last thing to make note of before we get into some of the specific setups here are chins, and the only thing you have to keep in mind for chins is the origin tile of a target, or you know, the actual main tile of a target. On some of the dragons in here, being that they're 2x2 or sometimes 3x3, it is the southwestmost tile that chins will scan from, or anything really looks for when doing AoE, so that's why you'll see Corrupt Blaster Shot not really spread north too well, or spread east super well. It always spreads south and west, so when you're running through the dungeon, I'll show you in the spots to keep that in mind of later on in the example run, but it's just something to keep in mind of. The Crystal Daggers are there just for a Bladed Dive swap. There's nothing fancy there. If you have Flowers and an Excalibur, go ahead and bring those, or whatever your Bladed Dive swap is. So real quick on screen is my EOF setup for using range, and this is kind of just my standard EOF setup, SGB, Debo, and ECB. SGB is really nice in this dungeon. Most of the trash mob dragons are 2x2 or bigger, or even 3x3 or bigger. I can't quite remember what their hitbox is, but using Chin SGB on them does a lot of damage, especially the set of 4 gemstone dragons just after teleporting from Verak Lith. If you can get them to line up there, that's 4 SGBs and it does a lot of damage, and sometimes they like overlap on each other and whatnot, and it's a pretty good time. Debo I'm starting to use less and less simply because of the adrenaline cost. However, if you're using stuff like Incendiary Shot in certain places, you can get away with it being that the critical adrenaline will help you out. However, I think most people now are just spamming bow spec over and over instead of Debo because it's less adrenaline and more likely to crit. However, I still like using Debo, so it's still in the preset. And last but not least is my ECB EOF. Honestly, this is probably my favorite one to use, as ECB can really dish out a lot of damage, and it plays well into the risk versus reward playstyle, being that you're sacrificing healing potential for doing more damage, which, you know, at the end of the day, that's kind of the answer I always use on anything, is do damage now, ask questions later. Now, I did experiment with Decimation EOF here, and it is usable. However, I believe it needs a few tweaks in order for it to be more usable. 55% adrenaline for a 10-second spec of AoE damage is a tall ask, even for using crit adren with Incendiary Shot. So honestly, I just leave it out and I use Chins for my AoE instead. Maybe if they update it to where it lasts longer, like say 30 seconds of AoE, or 20 seconds, or even 15, but it costs less adrenaline, however they would want to balance it, I would be more than happy with those changes. However, for now in its current state, I omitted it from this guide. As far as my quiver setup goes, I keep Hydric Spolts in all of them for my dual wield and its Coroming swap on the Blights, and then I just have different arrows in all of them. The 3 arrow types that I bring are Death Spore, Full, and Jazz Dragonbane. The Death Spore are there to try and save adrenaline on Death Swift, so you can get a Death Swift off with 0 adren cost and immediately do an Incendiary Shot to get crit adren throughout the DS you're doing. Personally, I find these arrows absolutely obnoxious, and I might do a video later on of like maybe some different tweaks of different items and how I think they should work differently and whatnot, as kind of like potential updates I'd like to see or something like that. But RNG of Death Spore, yes, they're good, but man, are they obnoxious. Every other arrow that builds some type of stack or has some type of stack to build up to a passive or an active effect, all use just getting a successful hit on the target to build up stacks, whereas Death Spore requires you to crit to build up stacks. And so sometimes you crit and you get all 5 crits from your Gricko itself and you're off to the races. Other times you're set there after a rapid in a Gricko, just kind of setting there with maybe 2 stacks or something. You know, it all happens and it's all RNG, so maybe in the future I'd like to see them updated to where, like, say it takes 10 stacks to get the effect, or even 15 or something, just something where we could build a consistent rotation I would really like to see. However, the effect is still very useful, basically allowing you to have a full Incendiary Shot during your Death Swift. The full arrows are here just for basically the arms at BSD and the Lava Strike Worms on the way to Verak. And the main star of the show in this guide is the Jazz Dragonbane arrows. These arrows, like full arrows, do increase damage, but it is double the value, being that full arrows only increase damage by 15%, only 15%, but they have an accuracy effect where it is negative. It reduces accuracy by 10%, whereas Jazz Dragonbane arrows increase damage by 30%. Yes, 30% damage. These things are nutty. And they also increase accuracy by 20%, so on most mobs in the dungeon, you could get away with using like Majorat or Dark Magic or something like that. However, I wouldn't recommend doing that because not everything in the dungeon is a dragon, but where these arrows work, they do slap. Now, to be honest, inside of a Death Swiftness, these things are quite limited, as you're gonna hit cap on pretty much everything other than rapid fire. But it would be fun to see what these arrows could do without a hit cap, but we'll have to wait for future updates to see what that would potentially look like. But overall, these arrows are highly effective at this dungeon, and I very much recommend using them. Last but certainly not least is my perk setup on the armor. Now, this is a second set of Elite Serenic that I own specifically for doing elite dungeons, and they basically just hold all of the different Slayer perks on them for getting different effects on different mobs inside of the dungeon. Now obviously, since ED2 is the Dragonkin Laboratory, the Dragon Slayer perk is going to greatly help you here, being that it is 7% damage. I went ahead and put mobile with my impatient 4, and as you can see, there is no enhanced devoted or devoted of any type on this gear. Personally, I've never really used enhanced devoted or devoted of any kind really at any of the elite dungeons. It is kind of nice maybe at ED3 or 1 where you're taking a lot more damage than ED2. However, I've gotten by just fine while spamming a lot of KC here, so I think y'all can do it as well. Now, to be completely fair, Demon Slayer is absolutely overkill for elite dungeon armor, being that it's literally used on one mob in ED3, so if you're just going to set at ED2 for a while, you could replace that Dragon Slayer Undead Slayer with something like Absorbative 6 Lucky 1, or just Enhanced Devoted if you really feel like it. However, from testing on my other armor set, I tend to prefer Lucky 6 Absorbative 1 as far as damage reduction is concerned, simply because it is more useful under ECB effect. Because if you're prey flicking, obviously you're not getting soul split heals to put out as damage, and if you can just keep soul split on the whole time, it's usually a lot easier. It's honestly about the same, it's not too crazy of a difference. However, Lucky 6 Absorb 1 is definitely a fun combo to play with, or maybe Lucky 4 Absorb 2 if you want to go that route. Any of those will work just fine. Other than that, it's just kind of standard perks. It is Crackling 4, Relent 5, and Biting 4 is comboed with Dragon Slayer there. You can combo Biting with whatever you want, but if you're doing ED2, I would recommend having Mobile on armor, or a bare minimum on your Bladed Dive swap, and then you can just swap to that for Surging, and then Dragon Slayer in the mix somewhere. Alrighty, now that we've gotten through all this information, I think that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and get into an example run. Alrighty, we have our preset loaded up, we're ready to go. I like to use Reckless Aura here just for the accuracy. I find Majorat slightly obnoxious. But anyways, go ahead and enter normal mode, turn on our prayers, put on Bladed Dive, and I like to Surge, then Bladed Dive onto this tile here, and then run towards the center, and then go towards the barrier. It's just to aggro all of the little slimes. And the original ones here in the dungeon, those are the only ones that count for opening this up, and you have to kill 4 of those. So I just kind of chin these down with like a rapid and a snap. And then once that's open, Surge Bladed Dive. I like to equip my bow, use a Gricko, and a bow spec on this guy, and that usually kills him. Yep. And then you can go ahead and use a Corrupt Blast. Be a basic, and then I'll go ahead and rapid this guy. Go back to the other one with a Gricko, maybe. And he's dead. Surge Bladed Dive. And I tried to get into this tile, but it didn't work that time, so it is what it is. Maybe use a Snapshot into a Snipe. I don't think any of these are going to be in Chin range. This guy, oh, this one is, so I'll use Chin SGB here. If they're not in Chin range, just go ahead and use your bow per usual. And then for this last one, I'll just hit him with a Rapid Fire. No, that one's still alive. We're good to go. Surge Bladed Dive over to the corner over here. Sometimes I make it, sometimes I don't. And then on these, I just like to use a couple bleeds, and then a Debo. And that usually opens it up. If not, just toss another couple basics and you should be fine. Here, I'll just Gricko. And use a stun. Stuns is what stops their Time Warp attack. And that happens below 37k, so just once you see the pop-up in the center of your screen, you should be good to go, and you can just go ahead and use a stun or a bind, or anything else really, but usually binding shot or tight bindings is what I use. And here, I'll use a bow spec on this guy, run South Place Mines for this dragon. Rapid Fire also counts as a bind, so you can use that to freeze them. Use binding shot on him. Finish him off with a snap. He needs a little more assistance. We'll use a Gricko. And then get a couple bleeds going on this guy. And then I'll just Debo. Didn't need the Limitless there. Or the Threshold stun, so. Go ahead and hit this guy with Rapid Fire. It's okay to press Limitless there. I don't ever really use Limitless on them on a Stellarn anyway. So we'll hit snap, and then a bind. If you get melee distance with this dragon, usually it'll cause this one to block all of the other trash mobs. However, this time one slime got through, so I'll just go ahead and kill him real quick. Oh, he died anyways. So here, swap over to my Grim and my other ring, and then I'll hit ECB, and I'll go ahead and bow spec Rico into an SGB. And we got a nice pre-phase there of about 150k. When you're below 200k, that's when he'll go into his soft walk. And here, I like to try and build up some stacks, and I got lucky with my stacks there for Death Spore, so I'll go ahead and debo, or DS I mean, into an Incendiary. Just try and build up. And I'll even go ahead and A-pot. Oh, it slam dunked right in there, so I'll go ahead and hit ECB, Rico into an SGB snap, should be dead. Yep, it's dead. And use the rest of my bow spec and ECB on these guys. I'll hit this guy with a debo just for funsies. Oh, hit the wrong threshold there. You don't want to do that. I have Salt the Wound on V, and then I have Tight Bindings on my dual wield because it's technically a flank, just so I can have both abilities. There, I like to Bladed Dive Surge, stand at the base of the stairs, and then you can Bladed Dive Surge on a diagonal, and it usually will skip the spiders. However, it is a heavily RNG skip, just based on spider positioning, and which is pretty much completely random. Now, this is the first spot I like to use my acceleration potion. So what I'll do here is run around this spike, Bladed Dive, Surge, Surge, Bladed Dive, Surge, Surge. Might be a little bit confusing, but if you watch that back a couple times, you'll see what I did. But I use the acceleration potion to clear my Bladed Dive instantly, so I can Bladed Dive Surge out, and then you can only Surge on the next game tick. And then you can Surge Bladed Dive around in kind of like a V shape, and then I just press Surge 2 more times. And then for these, I just break these black dragons into 2 groups. This one here, from where I land, and I chin those, and then I chin the 2 up here. And you always have to attack the north one when chinning to get the chins to work, basically. And then what I'll do here is just grab the aggro of these guys and then run back over to this little bone in the ground. And I try to get a Death Swiftness going. Now this one doesn't want to be chinned, so I'll just go ahead and use the bow spec on him. And then this one should chin. Yep, so I'll go ahead and SGB him. Also, Dragon Slayer Sigil, or the ability, is 10% damage extra for 10 seconds, so feel free to use it wherever. However, I would not use it on some trash mobs just before you go into a boss. But here, I'm just go ahead and using some thresholds inside my DS, chinning when applicable, and then if something isn't in chin range, just use your bow, it'll get melted anyways. Now here I like to swap over to my full arrows, and then prep an ECB spec, and I'll Gricko this guy while placing mines. Build up some more specs, or stacks for my bow spec. Go ahead and bow spec, I'll Gricko this guy. Snapshot this guy. A bleed and a second bleed, and then I'll rapid fire this one. Sometimes I use different thresholds here, but this is what I happen to use this time. But back to the Dragonbane arrows. Those 2 look like they're going to want to chin. And they are. So I'll go ahead and hit another SGB just for funsies. Hit a couple basics into a snap. This one's still alive, so we'll just use an ability on him. And then this one we can just Gricko. And this one I just kind of use basics on. Maybe I'll hit bow spec. And then a couple more basics to get back to 100. One more because he's on 100 HP, but you know, happens to the best of us. Put the Grim and the Ring back on. I typically will forget to swap back to Scripture just after Stellar, and it's usually by the Lava Strikes is when I remember, but you can go ahead and put your Scripture on just after the, after you finish a Stellar. So here what I like to do is use an ability, Surge, and then TC with an ability. Didn't go that time, probably wasn't on the right tile, but here I'll just use a couple of abilities. And we'll hit him with an SGB here. And now I'm going to go ahead and go for some Death Spore stacks. Maybe this Rapid Fire will give me some. Alright, we got our stacks built up, so I'll go ahead and DS. Incendiary with A-Pot. And it blew up on there, so now we can go ahead and go for a Bow Spec into an ECB. I'm just going to go ahead and preemptively Disrupt. And I'll Limitless here into a Rapid. And preemptively on the third stack there, I went ahead and SGB'd. Now we'll just hit another Debo. That was decent damage. I'll just put on full arrows for this. Back to the Dragonbane, and then just continue to thresh it out. Hit another Bow Spec. Hit Frag Shot and run away so it walks him. And if you want an ECB, you can. I'm just gonna thresh it out here real quick. Hit him with Snapshot, and he's dead. And here, I'll try and Bladed Dive across. Surge is a little bit wonky on that path. The path kind of zigzags back and forth for what are actually walkable tiles, so I always Bladed Dive across that one just to make it a little bit easier. And here, I'll Surge Bladed Dive, Surge again. And it looks like we did not get that good of a pattern here. So it looks like 2 of them are going to chin nicely, and then maybe a third, but it's probably only 2. What I'm looking for to see if they're going to chin nicely is obviously north is this direction. So if the tile to scan from is going to be here, and it's checking this dragon. If the other one's too far away, it's not going to really work. And Debo, the last one, they both died, and so let's get a couple bleeds off on this one. Maybe a Gricko, and then my Bow Spec is running out, so I'll go ahead and recharge it here. Hit another basic, and then Surge Bladed Dive up to this area. And then these happen to be nice in chin range. If this one is a little bit further back, you can actually run back a couple tiles, and it will pull him into melee distance of this one, so then you can get your chins to work. But if this dragon is too far to the west, it's just not going to work. Well, looks like they tried to steal some of my health, but is what it is. Oh, my book didn't swap. Yeah, that might be helpful. For this Hydrix, I just like to double bleed, and then ECB, and then hit Rapid Fire. I'll hit another Bow Spec. Ricko, and that's death. Alright. And here's where I Excel Pot. Kind of Surge, Bladed Dive Surge on that diagonal, and then kind of get yourself in front of the stairs, and then you can just Bladed Dive Surge again, up to where these dragons are. And now here, sometimes these like to play with chins, but most of the times they don't, so I just end up attacking them singly anyways. Or individually, I should say. And here I'm actually going to try and build up so I have 100% adrenaline to start the boss fight. So I'll just keep using some basics here. And then if you want to bank, you can just right-click bank, press your preset key, usually just press 1 on your keyboard. And here, swap over to Grim, the ring, turn on the Grim, and then from these bones, I like to surge in and double place mines. Mines do work on the hands here at BSD, and I like to run to this tile and plant my DS. I don't bother with anything special on the DS. I don't try and go for stacks or anything. And he's already at 570k, so I'm going to go for a SGB into a Debo. And we got a nice pre-phase there. Anything below 520k, he will immediately phase into arms here. So just try and get as much damage on a couple game ticks or a single game tick as you can. just before 520, so usually just SGB Debo. And then you can just go from there. On these, I'll just use thresholds, ECB spec, and bleeds and whatnot, just kind of damaging as I can. Okay, Deadshot was a little bit of a waste there. I'll just go ahead and bow spec on this guy. And I am using my full arrows here, because obviously Dragon Bane's not going to work. Just realized my action bar was unlocked. That's not good. And I'll hit a snap on this guy, and that should kill him. Surge over for the second set of mines, and then run back. And here, I'm going to put on my Death Spore, and hit Rapid Fire to try and build some stacks. Make sure my Calg is going. Ricko. And I got my proc, so we'll go ahead and DS. Incendiary, I'm just going to go ahead and bleed so my Incendiary can pop. Here, I'm going to ECB, bow spec, Gricko into an SGB, put on the right arrows, snapshot, I'm just going to go ahead and rapid for the adrenaline. We're at 3 stacks, so I'll 10 Ds, into a Gricko, into a Debo, into a basic, into a Debo. I'm just kind of improving off of what adrenaline I got now. The spiral spawned up over in this corner, so you have to take a couple steps out. If you get the spiral that spawns on the north, if it's a north start spawn for the spiral attack, you don't have to move it all from this tile that I was standing on, but if it is a south spawn, you do have to move back a couple tiles, or else the Dragonfire will come right on your position. Now, I should explain real quick the spots that I was using here while BSD is jumping around. So these are the safe spot tiles for arms. The arms will never touch you on these tiles. See where this little diamond is, the short side of this little diamond shape is pointing to, or this crystal shape, whatever you want to call it. It works on any of the quadrants in between arms, and you can just kind of go between them. And I just like to surge back and forth, waiting for that fire, like that. And that's how I deal with arms. So it's just 2 different tiles that I stand on. Alright, we're good to go. I'm just going to go for a bow spec here, and then ECB. Rapid fire with my D-Slayer Sigil. And finish off with an SGB, maybe Limitless into a snipe, or a snapshot I meant. And that is the dungeon. I was a little bit slow because I was trying to explain stuff. If you're just keeping focus and running through the dungeon, I usually see about 14-minute runs, maybe 13.5 minute. And then if you're really fast on your banking, you can see 4 runs an hour here. Now, there are some rangers who are definitely better than me and can probably do 4.5, maybe 5 runs an hour. I'm certainly not the best ranger, but hey, this is just me showing how I run through the dungeon. Ladies, gentlemen, and I did not forget about you Armadyl helmets. Thank you very much for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, if you could tap that like button and leave a comment down below, it'd be greatly appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, if you could consider subscribing, that would also help out greatly as well. Anyways, I'm Karguy. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next guide. Peace.